be reading from William Cooper's great work, Behold a Pale Horse, Chapter 9, Anatomy of an Alliance, the logic for the New World Order, the glue that binds the alliance of power, and the consequences. There's a quote here. It says, "All that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing." Edmund Burke, 1729 through 1797. Bill wrote, "I give lectures all over the United States. At some point, before, during, or after every lecture, some well-meaning but misguided soul tells me that I have it all wrong and that it's the Jews, the Catholics, the communists, or the bankers that are the cause of all our ills. The target group is blamed for everything that has ever gone wrong. Power over everyone and everything is always attributed to this group, whichever group it happens to be at that moment to that person. These poor people are on the right track in that there has been and certainly is a conspiracy to bring about a totalitarian world order. They are completely off track to think that any one ethnic, religious, or financial group alone could ever muster enough power to bring it to fruition. One group, you see, would always be opposed by all the others, special interest groups, that have existed and always existed throughout history. That is, unless they were all really the same group, as in the Illuminati, or for some reason they had become unified, as in the Bilderberg Group. The one-group scenario, except for the Illuminati, has been used effectively to divert your attention away from the truth. It has caused you to fight each other in a manipulation that always leads the real conspiracy closer to its ultimate goal, a new world order. Those of you who believe that Hitler was financed by Jews so that he could murder Jews have a serious logic deficit. The fanatical leftists who tout that it's the Nazis behind the conspiracy have ignored the fact that very wealthy Jews are certainly involved, along with many Catholics, Protestants, communists, atheists, capitalists, Freemasons, etc., all of whom are diametrically opposed to each other, at least on the surface. Those on the right who believe that it is communist forget that U.S. bankers financed the creation of the Soviet Union. Financial assistance from many different countries, institutions, and peoples of opposing religious and political beliefs have been the only thing that has kept the unworkable communist economy afloat for all of these years. The Rockefeller family has a bank branch in the Kremlin. Those on the right must also ask why, whenever we have set out to stop communism, the United States has only strengthened communism. No modern war, no matter what it was called, has ever resulted in territorial gain for the winner. It is not because our leaders are communists, as claimed by the right. Communism was a creation meant to function as the antithesis to the United States. Many of our leaders, however, are Illuminati. The answer lies with the faces of the Illuminati and the fact that several unifying reasons for bringing about the New World Order surfaced immediately following World War II. It is possible, however, that one, two, or more of these reasons are not real, and thus manipulations. The evidence indicates that they are real and dangerous, each in its own way, and must be dealt with quickly and thoroughly. Following World War II, something happened that was to have tremendous significance for the future of all mankind. The intellectuals took note of this happening and brought it to the attention of the world power elite. The elite were severely shaken by the predicted repercussions of this event. They were told that by, or shortly after the year 2000, the total collapse of civilization as we know it, and the possible extinction of the human race could occur. It could occur, that is, if we did not destroy the Earth with nuclear weapons before then. They were told that the only things that could stop these predicted events would be the severe cutbacks of human population, the cessation of or retardation of technological and economic growth, the elimination of meat in the human diet, strict control of future human reproduction, a total commitment to preserving the environment, colonization of space, and a paradigm shift in the evolutionary consciousness of man. Those in power immediately formed an alliance and set about bringing the recommended changes to fruition through propaganda, mind control, and other manipulations of the masses. The Illuminati's prayers had been answered. What was this event that caused so much consternation and changed forever the future of the world? Millions of soldiers returned from war. The soldiers found lonely, eager women waiting for them. The greatest coupling in the history of human race occurred. The result was everyone born between 1941 and 1955, and the children that they would eventually produce. It was me, you, and everyone who lives today. It was the great worldwide baby boom. It was the culmination of all of man's efforts to survive through history. It was modern medicine, better diets, heat in winter, pure running water, and proper disposal of sewage. It was the point in history where the birth rate so exceeded the death rate that the world's population doubled between 1957 and 1990. It was the most wonderful time in the history of the world, but it was also the worst. It signaled the end of man's most precious achievement. An alliance of all the powers on earth, open and hidden, decided that individual freedoms could no longer be tolerated in the interests of the preservation of the human race. They believed the common man could not be trusted. What had been the unfulfilled dream of many individual groups became reality by the concentration of power in the alliance known as the Bilderberg Group. What had been impossible before was now promised. The New World Order that so many had envisioned was now a certainty. The first study was made during World War II to determine the impact of the returning soldiers upon the economy. The results mobilized the ruling elite. A second secret study was conducted in 1957 by scientists meeting in Huntsville, Alabama. It confirmed the results of the first. The conclusion was that civilization as we know it would collapse shortly after the year 2000 unless the population was seriously curtailed. The study expressed a concern that since atomic weapons existed, they would ultimately be used. Total worldwide disarmament was urged. Congress adopted the disarmament plan and created the U.S. Disarmament Agency. President Dwight David Eisenhower had this to say in 1957. As a result of lowered infant mortality, longer lives, and the accelerating conquest of famine, there is underway a population explosion so incredibly great that in little more than another generation, the population of the world is expected to double. A third study was made by the Club of Rome, ending in 1968, to determine the limits of growth. The result was the same. The Club of Rome was commissioned to develop a computer model of the world so as to predict the outcome of corrections made to social and economic structures by the elect. The Club of Rome was also asked to develop a computer model of a new world order. Both tasks were accomplished. Studies were done to determine a method to arrest the population explosion before the point of no return would be reached. It was determined that an immediate attack on the problem would involve 2 points of intervention. The first was to lower the birth rate, and the second was to increase the death rate. To lower the birth rate, several programs were put into motion. The first was the development of positive birth control methods, using mechanical, diaphragm and condom, chemical, foam and birth control pills, and medical, sterilization, abortion, and hysterectomy procedures. They were developed and implemented. The women's liberation movement was started with the demand for free abortions using pro-choice as its rallying cry. Homosexuality was encouraged and gay liberation was born. Homosexuals do not have children. Zero population growth became a hot subject at cocktail parties. Individual freedom, the heat of the moment, religion, and the old blue laws sabotaged these efforts. And while zero population growth became a reality in some areas, population increased rapidly in others. The only alternative left in the world's ruling elite was to increase the death rate. This was a difficult thing to do, as no one wanted to pick people out of a crowd and line them up for execution. Neither did they relish the possible consequences of an enraged public upon discovering they were being systematically murdered. Of course, a very short but deadly global war using nuclear weapons upon select population concentrations was contemplated, and to tell the truth, was not ruled out. The fact that such a population control was even contemplated confirmed the worst fears of those who had participated in the 1957 study. War was put on the back burner to simmer, but may become a reality. In the meantime, something else had to be done that would absolve the decision makers of guilt and place the blame on those who did not lead clean lives. Something that could be blamed upon Mother Nature. What was needed was a bubonic plague or some other horrible but natural disease. The answer came from Rome. Several top secret recommendations were made by Dr. Aurelio Pace of the Club of Rome. He advocated that a plague be introduced that would have the same effect as the famous Black Death of history. The chief recommendation was to develop a microbe which would attack the autoimmune system and thus render the development of a vaccine impossible. The orders were given to develop the microbe and to develop a prophylactic and a cure. The microbe would be used then against the general population and would be introduced by vaccine. The prophylactic was to be used by the ruling elite. The cure was to be administered to the survivors when it was decided that enough people had died. The cure would be announced as a newly developed, when in fact it had existed from the beginning. The plan is part of Global 2000. The prophylactic and cure are suppressed. Man has skyrocketed from a defensive position, largely subordinated to nature's alternatives, to a new and dominant one. From it, he not only can and does influence everything in the world, but, voluntarily or unwittingly, can indeed does determine the alternatives of his own future, and ultimately must choose his options for it. In other words, his novel power condition practically compels him to take up a new regulatory function that, willy-nilly, he has to discharge with respect to the world's mixed natural human systems. Having penetrated a number of the erstwhile mysteries and being able to sway events massively, he is now vested with unprecedented, tremendous responsibilities and thrown into a new role of moderator of life on the planet, including his own. Those words were written by Dr. Aurelio Pace and are taken verbatim from page 607 of the Global 2000 report to the President. Funding was obtained from the U.S. Congress under HB 15090 in 1969, where $10 million was given to the Department of Defense's 1970 budget. Testimony before the Senate committee revealed that they intended to produce a synthetical biological agent, an agent that does not naturally exist and for which no natural immunity could have been acquired. Within the next 5 to 10 years, it would probably be possible to make a new infective microorganism which could differ in certain important aspects from any known disease-causing organisms. Most important of these is that it might be refractory to the immunological and therapeutic processes upon which we depend to maintain our relative freedom from infectious disease. Sir Julian Huxley said, "Overpopulation is, in my opinion, the most serious threat to the whole future of our species." The project, called MK Naomi, was carried out at Fort Detrick, Maryland. Since large populations were to be decimated, the ruling elite decided to target the undesirable elements of society. Specifically targeted were the black, Hispanic, and homosexual populations. The poor homosexuals were encouraged on one hand and scheduled for extinction on the other. The African continent was infected with smallpox vaccine in 1977. The vaccine was administered by the World Health Organization, according to Dr. Strecker, Robert Strecker. Without a cure, the entire black population of Africa will be dead within 15 years. Some countries are well beyond epidemic status. The U.S. population was infected in 1978 with the hepatitis B vaccine. Dr. Wolf Simenis, the ex-roommate of Pope John Paul II, was a mastermind behind the November 78 to October 79 and March 1980 to October 81 experimental hepatitis B vaccine trials conducted by the Center for Disease Control in New York, San Francisco, and 4 other American cities. He loosed the plague of AIDS upon the American people. The gay population was infected. The ads for participants specifically asked for promiscuous homosexual male volunteers. Whatever caused AIDS was in the vaccine. The vaccine was manufactured and bottled in Phoenix, Arizona. The cure will be announced as newly developed when in fact it had existed from the beginning. This plan is part of Global 2000. The prophylactic and the cure are suppressed. The order was given by the Policy Committee of the Bilderberg Group, based in Switzerland. Other measures were also ordered. The one you will be able to check out the easiest is the Haig-Kissinger depopulation policy, which is administered by the State Department. Stay tuned for part 2 of Anatomy of an Alliance.